Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we bring you a story that will shake the corridors of power from Washington to Brussels. Burkina Faso has just signed a $50 billion oil and energy deal with the United Arab Emirates, and the world is scrambling to understand what this means. For decades, Africa's resources were siphoned away by outsiders. But today, in a bold and unprecedented move, Ouagadougou has flipped the script, taking control of its energy destiny and rewriting the rules of global partnership. Make no mistake, this isn't just another deal, it's a declaration. A declaration that Africa will no longer be a playground for foreign interests, but a battlefield of sovereignty and progress. The shockwaves are already being felt. Western powers are furious, analysts are stunned, and African nations are inspired. Could this be the moment the balance of power finally tilts? Stay with us, because here on Talk of Africa 3.6, we dig deeper, we cut through the noise, and we bring you the unfiltered truth about Africa's rise. Tonight's story isn't about oil alone, it's about dignity, independence, and the future of an entire continent. This is the deal the West never wanted to see. This is the deal that changes everything. Burkina Faso has just signed a $50 billion oil and energy deal with the United Arab Emirates. Yes, you heard that right, $50 billion echoing across the deserts of the Sahel and the skyscrapers of Dubai. This is not just an agreement. This is a thunderclap on the global stage. A bold statement that Africa's destiny is no longer dictated by colonial legacies or Western boardrooms. For far too long, Burkina Faso and many African nations have been forced into dependency, importing overpriced fuel, bowing to the manipulation of international cartels, and watching their people suffer in the dark while their own natural wealth flowed abroad. But tonight, everything changes. This deal is more than pipelines and refineries. It is about sovereignty. It is about the courage of a nation that dares to say, "We will no longer beg, we will build. We will lead."
Ladies and gentlemen, as we stand at this defining hour, one truth rises above all others. This $50 billion oil and energy deal between Burkina Faso and the United Arab Emirates is not just a contract, it is a revolution. A revolution that speaks louder than tanks and missiles. A revolution that builds not on destruction, but on creation. Think carefully about the timing. Why now? Why has Burkina Faso chosen this moment to step boldly into history? The answer is clear, because the chains of dependency have finally been broken. The years when the Sahel was treated as the backyard of Europe are over. The days when African leaders signed away resources for pennies while their people remained in darkness are over. Now, under a new generation of leadership, Burkina Faso has chosen a future where dignity is priceless and sovereignty is non-negotiable. But this revolution is not only economic, it is cultural, spiritual, and generational. Children born today in Ouagadougou will grow up not and defined by what it lacks, but by what it builds. They will inherit schools powered by reliable electricity, hospitals where machines do not fall silent because of blackouts, industries that hum with life, and cities illuminated like beacons of Africa's rise. The student of tomorrow will no longer whisper under candlelight but study under the bright glow of a future powered by Africa's own resources. And yet, let us not be naive. The forces that once exploited Africa will not sit idly by. Already, in quiet corridors of Paris, London, and Washington, meetings are being held. Strategies are being drafted. They will whisper words of concern. They will attempt to sow division. They will use media propaganda to portray this deal as risky, unstable, dangerous. But the truth is simple. They are afraid. Afraid because the narrative has shifted. Afraid because Africa no longer asks permission. Afraid because Africa is becoming ungovernable by their old tricks. Brothers and sisters, the West's fear is our proof of progress, and it is in this fear that Africa must find courage. For courage is not the absence of threats, but the will to face them head-on. Burkina Faso has shown courage, the way has shown trust, and together they have sparked a light that no empire can extinguish. Now imagine, if you will, the ripple effect of this deal. Mali, Niger, Guinea, Senegal, Congo all watching closely. What happens when the dominoes fall? What happens when one African nation after another begins to sign billion-dollar deals on equal footing, not begging for aid but demanding partnership? What happens when Africa stops being seen as a continent of crises and is recognized as the engine of global growth? I will tell you what happens. The world changes forever. This is why today matters. This is why this deal is more than ink and signatures. It is the beginning of a wave that cannot be stopped by sanctions, cannot be derailed by propaganda, cannot be broken by intimidation. For a wave is not one drop of water, but millions rising together, and Africa is rising. Now to my African brothers and sisters listening tonight, I say this. This victory is yours, but it is also a responsibility. Do not let complacency set in. Do not let enemies of progress divide you. Do not let the colonizers of yesterday disguise themselves as partners of today. Watch carefully, defend your sovereignty fiercely, support your leaders when they walk the difficult path of independence, and never forget, the destiny of Africa is in African hands, and to the world I say, understand what is happening here. This is not isolation. This is integration on Africa's terms. This is not rejection. This is selection of partners who respect us. This is not about turning away from the world. It is about standing tall in it, unbent, unbroken, unashamed. The symbolism of this deal will echo for generations. Just as Dubai rose from the desert through vision and courage, so too will Ouagadougou rise from the Sahel, the oil that once enriched outsiders will now fuel our dreams. The gas that once left us in darkness will now power our industries. The revenues that once filled foreign banks will now build African futures. Citizens of Africa, let this moment be written not just in the contracts of lawyers, but in the hearts of all people. For this is not the story of Burkina Faso alone. This is the story of Africa itself, a continent reclaiming its rightful place in history. And so, as we close this broadcast, I leave you with this call to action. Stand with Burkina Faso. Stand with Africa. Stand with sovereignty. For the road ahead will. History is not just written in books, nor confined to the whispers of the past. History is born in moments like this, moments that shift the axis of power, moments that awaken entire generations, moments that echo louder than the cannons of colonizers and the speeches of politicians. Today we are standing at the edge of one such moment. One so colossal that even the architects of the world as so-called order could not have imagined it. Burkina Faso has signed a $50 billion oil and energy deal with the United Arab Emirates. Yes, $50 billion, an amount that resounds like thunder across the skies of Africa. This is not simply ink on paper, not merely a contract between governments. This is a declaration of sovereignty, a clarion call that Africa is not a beggar at the doors of former empires, but the master of its own house, commanding deals of scale and dignity with those who recognize its worth. Pause for a moment and imagine the number, 50 billion. Imagine what this means for a nation that, for decades, was spoken of by the West as though it were too poor, too weak, too insignificant to matter. The West painted Burkina Faso as a forgotten backwater, a pawn on a chessboard where only Europe and America played, and yet today, from Ouagadougou to Dubai, the world is forced to admit, Burkina Faso has risen. This deal is not only about barrels of oil and megawatts of power, it is about fire, the fire of dignity, the fire of progress, the fire of unity. For too long, energy in Africa has meant scarcity, darkness in the villages, blackouts in the cities, generators roaring where power stations failed. The lack of electricity was never a natural condition, it was engineered by decades of exploitation and neglect. And yet, here we are, a partnership of vision that promises not only light in our homes, but light in our destiny. This deal means refineries built on African soil, not shipped abroad. It means pipelines controlled by African hands, not foreign corporations. It means jobs, tens of thousands of jobs, from engineers to welders, from transporters to administrators. It means revenues flowing into the coffers of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, not siphoned into offshore accounts of multinationals. But most of all, it means the shackles are breaking. For too long, our natural resources were exported raw, drained from beneath our feet only to enrich the skyscrapers of Paris, London, and New York. The story was always the same. Africa produces, others profit. But today, in partnership with the Way, the story is being rewritten. The refinery plants that will rise from Sahel soil, the solar and gas turbines that will hum with energy, the oil wells that will flow under the banner of African sovereignty, all of this is proof that Africa no longer accepts injustice as its fate. Brothers and sisters, let us remember the symbolism. Burkina Faso means the land of upright people, and upright they have stood, shoulder to shoulder with their Sahelian brothers, Mali and Niger, to declare to the world, we are not for sale. We are not weak. We are not subjects. We are partners. Think of what $50 billion truly means. It is not charity. It is not aid. It is not the crumbs of a Western loan wrapped in the chains of debt. It is investment, mutual, strategic, dignified. The Way itself, a desert transformed into a beacon of prosperity through vision and energy, recognizes in Burkina Faso and the Sahel not poverty but potential. They see what we see, the sleeping giant of Africa awakening, and make no mistake, the West is trembling. Their newspapers may pretend to be objective, their commentators may cloak their fears in words of caution, but the reality is plain. They did not see this coming. They imagined that Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger would forever be tethered to French companies, to IMF loans, to European partnerships that gave with one hand and robbed with the other. But today, the narrative is shattered. Africa has choices. Africa has allies. Africa has power. The construction that will follow this deal will reshape the landscape itself. Roads and railways built to connect refineries, pipelines stretching across borders, ports upgraded to export refined products not rock-rude, but refined, value-added. Fuel under African control. This is not only an economic transformation but a geopolitical earthquake. For the first time, the Sahel is not simply resisting the West, it is outpacing it. Citizens of Africa, hear me when I say, this deal is not just Burkina Faso's triumph, it belongs to every African who has dreamed of a continent that stands tall. It belongs to the farmer who will see cheaper fuel for his tractor. It belongs to the student who will have uninterrupted electricity to study by. It belongs to the factory worker who will power machines not by foreign imports but by African energy. This is the meaning of sovereignty, not just holding flags and singing anthems, but controlling the lifeblood of the economy energy. And with this deal, Burkina Faso is telling the world, Africa controls its future. The visionaries in Ouagadougou and Abu Dhabi have lit a torch, and that torch now burns across the horizon. No longer can the world ignore Burkina Faso. No longer can the continent's destiny be dictated from Paris or Washington. The age of exploitation is ending. The age of African power is beginning. And so I say again, history is being written before our very eyes. Burkina Faso and the way $50 billion, oil and energy, sovereignty and power. The West did not see this coming, but Africa has been waiting for this moment for centuries, and now the wait is over. Brothers and sisters of Africa, and people of the world who still believe in justice, today I stand before you to share a story that has shaken the foundations of global economics, a story that has sent tremors through oil markets from New York to London, from Paris to Riyadh, from Beijing to Moscow. It is the story of a land that many dismissed, a land the so-called powerful once mocked as small, landlocked, and dependent. That land is Burkina Faso. And it has just signed a $50 billion oil and energy deal with the United Arab Emirates, an agreement that is more than numbers, more than barrels, more than pipelines. It is a declaration of sovereignty, a rewriting of history, and a bold announcement that Africa will no longer beg at the tables of others. The air was heavy in Ouagadougou the day the deal was announced. Markets had whispered rumors for weeks, but when the final signatures were placed on paper, when the ink dried under the weight of leaders' hands, the world realized it was witnessing a geopolitical earthquake. $50 billion. Not aid, not loans, not the deceptive assistance tied with hidden chains. No, this was investment, partnership, energy, and strategy. For the first time, an African state that once had no oil of its own became a central hub in the global energy conversation. Why is this important? Because energy is the lifeblood of modern civilization. Without it, factories fall silent, cities go dark, economies collapse. For over a century, energy has been weaponized to control nations. Who controls the oil, controls the politics. Who controls the gas, controls the destinies of others. That is why the West has fought endless wars in the Middle East, why they toppled leaders in Latin America, why they strangled nations with sanctions. They understood that energy was not just about powering cars and homes, it was about powering empires. And now, for the first time, Burkina Faso, and they dismissed, has positioned itself at the heart of a new alliance with one of the richest energy producers on earth, the United Arab Emirates. Together, they have struck a deal that not only reshapes the Sahel but threatens the monopoly of Western oil giants who for decades have treated Africa's resources as their birthright. The details are staggering. $50 billion committed to building state-of-the-art oil refineries, solar farms, and natural gas pipelines. A joint venture that ensures engineers will be trained, workers will be employed, universities will produce the next generation of energy scientists. Unlike the exploitative contracts of the past where Africa's wealth was extracted, exported, and sold back at inflated prices, this deal mandates that a significant portion of the profits remain in Burkina Faso, reinvested in schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. The announcement caught the West unprepared. Their diplomats scrambled for explanations, their media outlets spun narratives, calling it risky, unsustainable, controversial. But beneath the headlines, their fear was clear. For decades, Africa's energy had been controlled from Paris, London, Washington. Now, Ouagadougou has joined hands with Abu Dhabi and declared, "We will chart our own path." What does this mean for Burkina Faso? Imagine for a moment a country that has been strangled by the CFA franc, denied true sovereignty, blocked from global credit lines, punished for daring to think freely. Now, suddenly, this country has secured $50 billion not from begging bowls, but from bargaining tables. This is not dependency. This is leverage. This is not charity. This is partnership, this is not subjugation. This is sovereignty. And what does it mean for Africa? It means a new model is here. For too long, Africa's story has been one of extraction: gold taken to Europe, diamonds stolen to America, oil siphoned off to multinationals. But this deal shows another possibility. Africa can negotiate on its own terms, build on its own land, and keep wealth in its own hands. If Burkina Faso can do it, why not Mali? Why not Niger? Why not Ghana, Senegal, or the Congo? This deal is not just a victory for one nation, it is a spark for an entire continent. But let us not be naive. Sparks can ignite flames, and flames can terrify those who sit atop fragile thrones of control. Already, whispers are spreading of Western intelligence agencies plotting, of sanctions being drafted, of pressure being applied to the way to withdraw. Already, lobbyists in Washington and Brussels are warning that Africa is falling into dangerous hands, but what they truly mean is this: Africa is slipping out of theirs. The way, for its part, has stood firm. We do not fear partnership with Africa, their ministers declared. We see in Burkina Faso not weakness but strength, not risk but opportunity, not chaos but potential. And with those words, the old narrative collapsed. For centuries, Africa was painted as the land of poverty, war, disease. But now, Africa is being seen as the land of energy, innovation, and courage. Let me remind you, $50 billion is not a token, it is not symbolic, it is real money, larger than the GDP of some European nations. It will fund oil refineries capable of processing millions of barrels a year. It will finance solar grids that light up rural villages long forgotten by colonial governments. It will lay down pipelines that connect the Sahel not just internally, but to global markets. Burkina Faso, once dismissed as small and insignificant, is now on track to become an energy hub, a bridge between Africa and the Middle East. A beacon of what is possible when sovereignty is embraced. And think of the timing. The world is shifting, oil prices are volatile. Europe is desperate for energy after its reckless geopolitical games with Russia. America is losing its grip on global dominance. China is rising, India is consuming, and the Middle East is repositioning itself as a power broker. Into this storm steps Burkina Faso, not as a pawn, but as a player, not as a beggar, but as a negotiator, not as a shadow, but as a light. The symbolism cannot be overstated. For decades, Western oil companies refused to invest in Burkina Faso, declaring it unstable and unprofitable. Yet those same companies extracted billions from Nigeria, Angola, Libya, leaving behind poverty and pollution. But now the way has flipped the script. They see profit in partnership, not exploitation. They see stability in sovereignty, not subjugation. They see the future, not the past. This is why the people of Burkina Faso poured into the streets in celebration. They did not celebrate merely the money. They celebrated dignity. They celebrated a leader who refused to kneel, a government that dared to think big, a nation that proved size does not determine destiny. They celebrated because, for once, the headlines about Africa were not about famine, war, or corruption. They were about victory, strategy, and pride. But let us also be clear. This deal is not without challenges. $50 billion is a heavy responsibility. There will be temptations of corruption, attempts at sabotage, pressures from enemies, and the risk of mismanagement. But if handled with wisdom, if guarded with vigilance, if built on transparency and accountability, this deal could transform not only Burkina Faso but the entire Sahel. And here is where the genius of the agreement lies. It is not simply about oil, it is about energy in all its forms: solar farms in the desert, hydroelectric plants along rivers, natural gas pipelines for industry, oil refineries for export. It is diversification, resilience, and modernization. It is the creation of an energy ecosystem that does not just export raw resources but builds capacity, creates industries, and generates employment. Brothers and sisters, let us reflect on the irony. For decades, the West warned Africa against depending on oil. They lectured us about diversification, about sustainability. Yet they themselves built their empires on oil, fought wars over oil, and grew rich from oil. Now, when Burkina Faso enters the game, they cry foul. But Africa will no longer be lectured by hypocrites. We will chart our own path, take our own risks, reap our own rewards. This deal is the beginning of a long journey. It is the first brick in a foundation that could elevate the Sahel to new heights. And it sends a message to every African child: you are not destined for poverty, you are not condemned to dependence, you are heirs of a continent rich in resources, rich in courage, rich in brilliance. If Burkina Faso can rise, so can you. So let the world tremble, let the oil markets panic, let the empires conspire, because a new chapter has begun, and it is written not in the language of colonizers but in the voice of Africa.